Hello, hello. Hope everyone's having a great day. Just want to welcome you all to our newest webinar, where today we're going to be covering the Nexudus MCP server. So for any of you guys who don't know me, my name's Sergiu. I'm one of the senior implementation specialists here at Nexudus. And with me today, we have Maddie, one of our product designers.
Hi,
Now,
everyone.
before we get into absolutely everything, a bit of housekeeping. So we've got 30 minutes together today. This should give us plenty of time to just walk through everything and leave some room for questions at the end. Speaking of questions, if you have any during the call, please put them in the Q&A section on Zoom. If for some reason you can't find it, make sure to click on the three dots on your toolbar, select the Q&A, and just drop your questions in there at any point. Either we'll answer them at the end of the session, or some of our moderators will get back to you directly. In terms of recording, you can take notes if you want, but if you don't want to, that's okay. This is going to be recorded, and it's going to be sent out to everyone at some point tomorrow. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. I think it's important that we actually talk about what exactly is an MCP. So an MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and this is sort of open standard. This was created by Anthropic, and is now widely adopted across the AI industry. And what this means is that this lets AI assistants connect to external software, such as Nexudus, and take actions on behalf of the user. You can think of this as a sort of USB-C for AI, where you have one universal adapter that kind of works across different tools and platforms. And this is really useful because it means that the MCP server works with a bunch of different AI clients, right? Like it works with Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, VS Code, and basically any future MCP compatible client without us having to actually rebuild it for each of these. Now, let's talk about what we actually did. The MCP server is a new hosted service that lets AI assistants connect directly to your Nexus account and carry out tasks. And the way that it carries these out is just by you talking to it in plain English. Now, in terms of the benefits, I think that probably the biggest one is the fact that there is no installation required. Now, operators, they don't need to install anything or configure anything. All you need to do is you just need to log in to your AI client, point your agent to the mcp.nexus.com, and connect. That's all you really need to do. Now, this is also really accessible to everyone. Right now, if you need data from Nexus or you need to, for example, just run a report, you need to always access the admin panel. Now, for most of you, this might seem like this is something that's very easy, as you probably know the admin panel very well. But for some people, this requires access, this requires training, and it can still be a barrier to entry to Nexus and how you use the system. Now, the MCP server will remove that barrier, and your more non-technical staff can just query data, do stuff like create bookings, look up members, and run reports. This is all done just by talking to the AI in plain English. There's no need to really access the admin panel, as you can just do everything through the client. As I mentioned previously, this works with a lot of different tools. So currently it supports Claude, Claude AI, Claude Desktop, ChatGPT, VS Code with GitHub Copilot, and any other MCP compatible clients. Lastly, a question that I'm sure is already on some of your minds is what is the cost associated with this? Now, this is available to every Nexus account at no additional fee. So it's already built into your subscription. So if right after this webinar you want to go give this a shot, you can. There's nothing stopping you. Continuing on, I think it's very important to actually make a difference between what our CLI is and our MCP. So some of you may already be familiar with our CLI. This is a command line interface that we've already had for a while now. And you might be wondering what exactly is the difference. So these two tools are complementary, but they're for different use cases. The CLI is mostly built for developers and more technical users. The main reason being is that it requires local installation, syntax knowledge, and even a bit of scripting. The upside is that this is fully deterministic, so it's the same command will always give you the same result every single time, unless, of course, your data changes in the meantime, right? But this is a much better choice for automation, scheduled workflows, or engineering works that needs to run unattended. On the other hand, the MCP server is built for basically everyone else. There's no installation required. You just connect to the URL and you talk to it in English or in whatever language you really want. You describe what you want and the AI interprets it. This is something that you need to keep in mind is that the output can vary depending on the context because the AI is thinking. It's not just running a simple command. So this is mostly useful for conversational one-off or more exploratory tasks. It's perfect for your operations team, different managers, or your support staff who just need access to data in regards to Nexus. The takeaway that we can take away from this is that the CLI isn't actually going anywhere. It's remaining the best choice for automation, but the MCP server opens an entirely new way for you to access Nexus data and your various workflows. You might also be asking yourself, oh, what can we actually do with it? So, in terms of what's actually possible, the MCP server will give your AI access to over 200 different entity types in Nexus. This is basically every record type that your team works with every single day using the admin panel, just using Nexus, right? In terms of some real life applications, you can tell it to, for example, I don't know, create a booking for a specific meeting room at 2 p.m. tomorrow for an hour, and it'll be able to do that. Or even better, and this is something that Maddie's going to show us later, is also you'll be able to run various reports. So summarize this week's occupancy by specific resource type, or what's a revenue trend over the last quarter. And then lastly, if you really want to do more things with it, you can also just have it run operations, check customers in, activate contracts, suspend users. It can do quite a few things. Now, before I hand this over to Maddie, I just wanted to make a point about safety. So the AI will not perform write actions without your confirmation. So you need to be sure that you're aware of the actions that you're asking it to perform. If you want to update records, make sure that those are the actual records you want to update. If you want to delete things, always be careful. But yeah, you should be given a prompt that just lets you say, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. Now, with all that being said, I think, Maddie?
Perfect. Thank you, Sergio. So I'm gonna be walking you guys through how to set up your MCP server. You can use different clients and different AI agents as Sergio mentioned. In my case, I'll be using Claude, so I'll kind of walk through the steps there. Um, the first thing I kind of want to talk through is just kind of the steps. The first thing we're going to do is actually set up a connector. We're going to sign in, which actually doesn't share any of your credentials with Anthropic, in this case for Claude, or whatever other AI agent. You go directly to a Nexudus login page, you authenticate through there using your admin user account. And the interesting thing and the benefit of having this as well is that the permissions that your user has as an admin will translate directly to the permissions that you have in the MCP server. So for those locations and those spaces and organizations running multiple roles for different functions within the businesses, and those users can still benefit from the MCP because what they can do through it is directly controlled by the permissions that they have in the admin panel. So keep that in mind. And the last thing that I also wanted to talk about is the access window. So we'd mentioned how CLI is a better kind of automation tool. The reason for that, and potentially it's more geared towards developers as well. So there's a bit of a barrier there. But the MCP, for security reasons, and because there's a lower threshold to barrier, there's also potential lower threshold for misuse of data or for things to go wrong. So for security reasons, we cap the sessions at 8 hours. So after 8 hours of using of authenticating, that token and that credential, whatever you've logged in through, is going to expire and you'll have to log in again. So we'll talk about that and we'll walk through that. So I'm actually going to go in and we're going to get started here in this, in my Claude account. So here, let me see if I can zoom in for everyone to have a better view. In settings, I'll go to connectors. In this case, I've removed it, but I've had it in the past. I'll add a custom connector. I'm going to name it Nexudus MCP, and the URL is https mcp.nexudus.com. So when I click add, what we're going to see is this page to connect. It's going to redirect me to the login page. Here, I'm just going to very quickly put in my safe password. It does ask you to kind of basically check a box that says you understand that you are connecting to an AI agent that, as Sergio explained, this is a non-deterministic kind of tool, so it can misinterpret things because it's kind of normal language based. So you do have to check that box. This bottom one essentially it's called it's a protection system that we built into the MCP. So essentially tokenizes any personally identifiable information so that the AI that you're running doesn't get any of that information. You can disable this. And again, I'll show you how as we kind of walk through. But to start with, we're going to start with a kind of disabled so we can see what it looks like and what information we're getting through when that option for privacy is enabled. The other thing I'd also say is it's very important that as an if you're aiming to use this tool, that you connect with your organization, make sure that you are allowed to use these tools for your role. Different organizations have different kind of terms and conditions around the use of AI, and despite the fact that there's a privacy kind of built into the system where we're not sharing any personal information about customers, it may be something that your business and your organization doesn't necessarily allow use for. So make sure that you do communicate there and make sure you understand the policies from your own organization on this. So you can see here all the different kind of actions that the tool is able to do. In this case, everything needs approval by default. We'll see that I can allow it to always make changes, and that's where we'd be very cautious and very wary to make sure that when you ask it to do something, if you've already told it you can always do, it's not going to ask you to confirm that action. It's just going to go ahead and make a booking, change a customer. So if you don't want to run into errors, make sure you never allow it to always make that change. Keep it to a approval basis so that every time you ask a new question or initiate a new session, then it's going to ask you to complete that or to approve that particular action. So we're going to start with something very simple. Can you list all the locations that I am an admin for? So while this is fetching that information, I've already gone ahead and I've kind of pre-made some other queries or other sessions to make sure that we have something to talk about. And I wanted to show you some of the interesting things that you can do with the system. And just to show here, it's asking me, it wants to read the different locations that I have. So if I were to click always allow, from that point forward, it's always going to take that action without asking me for permission, which can be quite for a read-only task, not so much, not anything to worry about. But if you are creating or updating, then it's something that you really have to be careful and making sure that you don't click that allow, always allow, because the system is going to go in. Sorry, not the system. Claude is going to go in this case, or whatever AI agent you're using, and take that action without asking you for permission because you've already given it permission in the past. So it's going through, it's asking me to all these different access levels as it kind of goes through and asks for the API for that list. It's going to come back with a list of locations. While it's doing that, one of the things that I've preloaded in the background is I've asked it in the past to give me a list of customers and bookings for this month. Now, I have a test account, so the list of bookings is quite small. But what you may want to do, depending on your role, is you may want to ask for all the bookings for today, including all of the products included in those bookings, right? That might be a great thing for front of house, for catering, for whatever that role might need for those days' bookings. And you can see here the privacy window kind of in action and that tokenization system, because it tells me what resource has been booked, but it doesn't give me any identifiable information about that customer. So the name is completely blocked off, and they won't be able to see that. I then, in this case, I actually already went ahead as well, and during the chat, I asked it to disable this PIE, or sorry, PII, which is that privacy kind of setting. And then what it does is essentially it asks me to re-authenticate. So I do have to then type my email and password again. It unblocks that privacy and tokenization system for the period of the session. And from that point forward, you can answer for personal information on customers. Again, be very careful about what kind of tier you have in terms of your subscription level with that AI agent, because some of the tiers do use your kind of sessions to train future models, and you don't want that information being used in that way. So again, be very careful, be very mindful of what you're doing when you're kind of disabling this option. So you can see here, it then gives me information about the customer. In this case, again, I've gone ahead and already kind of preloaded this, but we have, please create a booking for this customer tomorrow for 1 hour starting at 10 a.m. it does the booking, it confirms the booking. It also even told me how much that customer was going to be charged, and that the booking has not yet been invoiced. So it does give you quite a bit of context and information. Um, Going back to my recent chat here, let's go back to, I think it was still asking for information. Or I may have made a mistake and left the chat before it had actually completed its action, so I think it's restarted. Uh, so while this is going on, um, one of the things that I do want to kind of just kind of talk about and entertain is the idea that this really, as Sergio already mentioned, opens up a wide avenues of kind of what you can do with Nexudus. I know through the UI, we have a responsive UI for the admin panel, so you can do admin actions through the UI. This for mobile users, especially and on the go, using an AI agent or using the MCP server to connect and be able to run these kind of actions through the AI agent frees up an entire avenue of management and operations, right? It frees you up to be able to work more seamlessly from a mobile kind of device, and in some ways in a simpler way, where you're just asking it a question or asking it to create something or potentially update. If you're on a bus and you get an email saying, "Hey, would you mind changing my booking tomorrow for this?" It's something that you could very easily just log in or click on whatever AI tool you're using and ask it to change the booking for that customer. Um, it's still going. I think the reason here, you can see it basically reset when I left this window, so I apologize for that. I thought that it was going to be running in the background while I was showing you some of those other more interesting things. I'm going to let this run just until we get to the list. And then there's one more thing which I really do want to show, which is, again, we've talked about some of the things that you can do, but the benefit and the really cool thing about AI is it opens up avenues for you to kind of get creative with what you're doing. So, right, we're going to abandon this list because oh wait, there we go. Um, so again, very simple query, but it is giving me it's going to give me all the different locations that I'm an admin for. You can see it even gives me information of things that I didn't necessarily ask for. So it gives me some notes of what it thinks is meaningful. And this is where kind of that non-deterministic nature of AI comes in. Before going on, the other thing I wanted to show is some of the more complex things that you can ask. So in this case, I asked for a list of bookings for the last 30 days. I kind of made some additional bookings so there'd be more information here. Again, everything redacted. But I then went on and I asked it somewhat of a specific question where I wanted to see the utilization of resources as a percentage, looking at versus a resource has let's say X amount of hours available per week or per month, how many of those hours that it's available, it's actually being booked. So again, test account, this is going to be quite low, but you can see here, it's provided me with a report where it shows me the resource. It tells me the number of available hours that it has and the total number of hours that was booked and that utilization percentage. So you can ask some more complex questions. You can get some really interesting reports out of this. I was asking it to give me an average of check-in time for the customers that have checked in the past month and see how long they've been in the location. So there's a lot you can do and you can get quite creative with. Just because we're kind of moving quickly on time, I'm gonna go back and talk about a few other things. We've already looked about at the examples. So you can query, you can create, you can update, you can create reports, you can get lists. So there's an imagination amount of things that you can do. Your imagination is kind of the limit here of what you can accomplish. We did talk about privacy, but I wanted to kind of show you what this looks like. So that kind of restriction on what data is being passed on to the AI agent. You can see here all the different information and how it's tokenized. So you're going to see that PII colon name, email, phone, whatever it is, but you're not going to see that extra information about the customer. unless you ask the agent to remove that restriction, which is going to force you to re-authenticate and then allow you to see that information. From our side, we only log the kind of actions that are being taken, not necessarily any of the information that's being passed. We have no access to your prompts. It's literally, we know a booking was requested, or um, uh, a customer was updated. We don't know much beyond that from the client side. Within Nexudus, obviously, the admin panel holds that information. We've already talked about permissions, that it inherits exactly the account, the rights that your account has. So if your role is restricted to something, the MCP isn't going to change that. You're still going to be restricted to those same actions. And the 8 hour kind of session window where after that, you're going to be asked to authenticate again. So from the NCP standpoint, it does kind of prevent you from automating certain actions. You can still create some sort of automation as long as you then manually log in right before that runs, which kind of negates the point of automating. And again, the last thing we've already talked about is the number of supported clients, Claude, ChatGPT, anything that's compatible with an MCP server, which the vast majority of the bigger AI tools are, you're going to be able to use this tool with. So that I know it's quite short and you can do so many things. It's hard for us to fit it all in such a short webinar. But hopefully, this gives you the ability to know how to set it up and try it yourself. So there's so many things you can do, so many different prompts you can try. You can enhance kind of your workflow in a really creative way if you take advantage of this tool, and that's kind of what we're hoping for. The one thing I will say is right now this is limited to admin only. So the MCP, you're only going to be able to take action as an admin in as of now. So yeah, thank you so much. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to open up for questions. There's already quite a
Mhm.
few, yeah, Sergio, if you want to kind of kick us
Yeah,
off answering some of
I'll
these.
start doing a couple. So first one that I see here is this going to be read only or can it write and modify bookings? So no, it's not just read only. You can modify most Nexus records. And as Maddie mentioned before, it'll inherit the exact account permissions that you have. So if your account only has access to bookings, then that's the only thing that you're going to be able to modify, not anything else. Afterwards, oh, I'll just do one more. Can access be scoped per member? So a member only sees their own data. We're actually about to release a version where the permissions are role-based. So for example, an account can have read-only permissions or even like read-only for bookings. And that wouldn't be scoped to customers' own data. So the idea is for a member to be able to see their own data is something that we're looking at implementing in the near future.
Um, And then we have the next question is we have three businesses in one Nexus account. So can we use the MCP connection or three? So if your admin account has access to those locations, when you log in and you saw by the list that it generated for me, I have access to 4 different locations, then you'll be able to access all of those locations the same way your admin would be by logging into the admin panel. The next question. Um, you, you need to specify Nexudus in the queries, correct? Or is there a way to do chats that presume Nexudus queries? So you can see that on the questions that I created, I didn't tell the agent to use the Nexudus tool. Um, so it can get there, but do keep in mind the more kind of things you've set up into your AI agent, and as they become a broader kind of hub for these different tools, there's more and more room for error, right? So we'd recommend it's probably the best use case is to always specify use the Nexus MCP for XYZ, just to avoid any kind of potential issues, especially as these things become more and more common.
Afterwards, are the reports limited to what's in the Nexus analytics or can it pull custom ones? So no, you can actually customize whatever reports you really need as they're completely unlinked from the reports that you have in the default analytics. Maddie mentioned this previously, but you can go quite detailed and you can get some pretty complex reports if you give the MCP a bit of time and the correct prompt.
Um, I think
Ooh, I see a couple more just came in. So one of them is the AI being trained on our Nexudus data? So no, it only sees the data temporarily to answer requests and is not used to train anything whatsoever. Hmm. Afterwards, what if the AI makes a mistake and changes something? So, as we mentioned, the right actions require user confirmation. So you'll have to say that it is allowed to make this change or is not allowed to make this change. This is something that also, as part of best practices, something that I personally do is that I will always ask it to list out what actions it will take before I confirm what it will actually do. That way I can see a list of exactly, okay, this booking is going to be changed in this way. Do I want to confirm it? Yes or no? And then I can tell it exactly, yes, I want this to happen. No, I don't want this to happen. Or yes, but you need to make this change first. So something that you need to keep in mind when using the MCP is that because it will always try and think, you need to also be able to think alongside it and realize that maybe it will misunderstand what you're asking. So the more specific you are, the better it will be in the long term to make sure that you're not making a lot of, a lot of mistakes or that you're prompting it in the incorrect way.
Um,
Mm.
The next one, how is this different from the Nexus CLI? We did talk about this a little bit, but I think it's very important to understand that the CLI has nothing to do with AI. You can give AI access to a CLI tool, but CLI is just a command line input, right? It literally, you say in a very specific syntax, create XYZ, and it creates XYZ. And it's not a conversation, it's not AI based. You can give AI access to it. So CLI is very much a developer tool in most scenarios. I think it's becoming increasingly less with AI being able to take advantage of it. But the difference is MCP pairs directly with your AI agent. You don't need to, other than that setup that I walked us through, where you add your connector, there's nothing else that you need to do. You just start kind of telling it to do things, right? The CLI is a little bit more involved than that, both in setup and in connecting it to an AI system that can take advantage of that.
I think the last question for today, before we close this off, is going to be, can I use it with other tools other than Claude? So we personally use Claude, but this is works with any MCP compatible client, such as, for example, ChatGPT or VS Code Copilot. If you're having any issues setting this up, don't hesitate to just send a message to support@nexus.com and they'll be able to give you guys a hand. So yeah, I think with all that being said, thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.